أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقال الله تعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة خلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل بدعة ضلالة. Inshallah, today we'll study some verses from Surah Al-Anbiya, which is a Meccan surah. We'll be focusing on verses number 30 to 40. These verses have several important concepts. They address the issue of the creation of this universe, the creation of life on this planet, the ideology or the philosophy of what happens in this life, the inevitability of death, the purpose of life, and the hereafter. And if you pause for a moment, that people forever have been discussing these issues at different levels. Philosophers have debated it, prophets have talked about it, sages have talked about it, scientists are talking about it, and the common man and woman also think about these issues from time to time. How did this universe come into being? How did life start? Will the universe continue forever? Is there something called immortality? What's the purpose of our being over here? How does death occur? Is it the death of an individual? Does death occur at a cellular level? And what happens after death? If you look at it, these are very profound topics. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has addressed these issues in these verses that we will be studying. And I was astonished when I did some scientific studies, some research here on these verses, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used a particular word 1400 years ago in Arabic. And one of the scientific articles talking about Big Bang Theory also used the English translation of that word. So we'll look at this. So the first verse is verse number 30, Surah Al-Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Awalam yara alladhina kafaru. The emphasis is on yara. Yara is to see. أولم يرى الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون. So the translation, which is from Muhammad Asad, is that, are then they who are bent on denying the truth not aware that the heavens and the earth were once one single entity, which we then parted asunder, and that we made out of water every living thing? Will they not then begin to believe? So two important principles or two important topics discussed are the creation of universe from a unitary entity and the creation of life. If you look at this verse at the beginning, Avalam yara alladhina kafaru. Not those who disbelieve or deny the truth, not seen. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not use the word yalam? Don't they know? They don't see. Don't they see? How could anyone see the beginning of the universe? Actually, we see it. And I'll quote from a scientific article. Now, I'm actually mostly quoting from what is written scientifically because I don't understand these things very well. That the Big Bang Theory is the leading explanation about how the universe began. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there were one mass, we know that everything started from one mass. And the question that comes is, what existed before the mass? And Stephen Hawking, he has written a book about the story of the universe. When I read that book, or the first edition of that book, I thought that he was moving very close to acknowledging that there is God, there is Creator. But I think the last thing that I read about it was that before he died, he didn't think that he believed in Allah. But obviously, the matter did not come into being without somebody creating it. That's what we Muslims believe. So at its simplest, it says the universe, as we know, it started with a small singularity, then inflated over the next 13.8 billion years to the cosmos that we know today. Now that inflation can also be explained as expansion, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَمُوسِعُونَ. We are indeed expanding it. So the universe started with a singularity, with one mass. It is split. As it is split, it emitted enormous amount of heat, energy. Nothing could have existed or survived at that time. As it has started to cool down, as the scientists actually go with -0 second, the time zero when it split. And then within less than millisecond, it just went through a process of cooling down, and the electron, neutrons, protons came into being. The first element, according to the scientists, is hydrogen, followed by helium, and then oxygen. Now, because current instruments don't allow astronomers to peer back at the universe's birth, much of what we understand about the Big Bang Theory comes from mathematical formulas and models. Astronomers can see the echo. That was the word when I was reading, that they can see it. And it's like you're seeing the birth of the universe. And when I read this ayah, Alam yaro, don't they see? So 1400 years ago, Quran predicted that we will reach a stage through scientific development that it will be like a mushahida, an observation for us. So saying al ilma mushahida. You may not see something, you may have never seen something, but your knowledge is as good as seeing something. So you have to think that astronomers can, however, see the echo of the expansion through a phenomenon known as the cosmic microwave background. Now, what is that? They mentioned the first second and the birth of light in the first second of the universe began. The surrounding temperature was about 10 billion degrees Fahrenheit, according to NASA. So this is not me telling you. The cosmos contained a vast array of fundamental particles such as neutrons, electrons, and protons. These decayed or combined as the universe got cooler. This early soup would have been impossible to look at because light could not carry inside of it. The free electrons would have caused light or photons to scatter the way sunlight scatters from the water droplets to the clouds, NASA noted. Over time, however, the free electrons made up with nuclei and created neutral atoms. This allowed light to shine through. Now the light can be seen about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. This early light, sometimes called the afterglow of the Big Bang, is more properly known as the cosmic microwave background. So the scientists of today can see, as if they are seeing in front of their own eyes, this cosmic microwave background testifying what the Quran says. Now, the Quran does not depend upon science for its verification. Scientific theories come and go, they get refined, they get challenged, they get discarded. And I will again quote someone that I've already quoted before, Maurice Bucaille, the French, who became a Muslim and wrote a book, the Quran, the Bible, Quran, and the Science, that Quran has never been refuted by science. And you can see this thing. So now what happens next? The universe has been created. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create it la'ibin, the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, just for play. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created it with a purpose. And the purpose of creating the universe was to make it inhabitable so that it can sustain life. And where did life begin? In water. Whether you believe in evolution or you don't believe in evolution, or you believe in a process of designed evolution by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fact is testified by the Quran, life began in water. Now we say that Adam alayhi salatu was created from turab. So how can you reconcile the two statements? Okay. So if you look at the human body, 60% of our weight is composed of water. Muhammad Asad mentioned that if you look at the cellular level, this human beings are also composed of organs, tissues, and cells. Within the cell or outside the cell, you have a cell membrane, and inside the cell is protoplasm, where the nucleus, RNA, DNA, mitochondria, everything is there. It's mostly water. It's composed of water. If you look at the structure of the human body and the DNA and the RNA, the main ingredients are oxygen, hydrogen from the water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphate. Go and look at the structure of the RNA and the DNA. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talked about the turab, He didn't just mention turab. He also mentioned teen in lazib, salsalim, kal fakhar, different stages. So the creation of the human being, the building block, hydrogen and oxygen, come from water. When water is mixed with turab, it becomes clay, which is known as teen. When teen becomes little sticky, it's called teen in lazib. When it becomes dried up, it's like salsalim kal fakhar. So the Quran, by using those different terms, is actually giving us a process of human being. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, or the universe, He said, kun fayakun. So that is, according to the Quran, Alamul Khalq and Alamul Amr. Alamul Amr is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to do something, He says kun, and it is. But Khalq is a process which takes time, which goes through different stages. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the creation of the heavens and the earth, He talked about sab'a samawatin, and in 6 ayyam, 6 days. That's a time-related process. And the material to create the human being, it came from water and water mixing with the earth. So that's the process according to my understanding, and I may be wrong, but this is what I've understood from these 2 verses. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولذكر الله أكبر. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. The statement that Allah made out of water every living thing expresses most concisely a truth that is nowadays universally accepted by science. It has a threefold meaning. Number 1, water, and specifically sea, was the environment within which the prototype of all living matter originated. Secondly, among all the innumerable existing or conceivable liquids, only water has the peculiar properties necessary for the emergence and development of life. And third is the protoplasm, which I've already mentioned to you. So now, the next thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about is وَجَعَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَن تَمِيدَ بِهِمْ وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا فُجَاجًا سُبُلًا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقْفًا مَحْفُوظًا وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. The translation: and are they not aware that we have set up firm mountains on earth, lest it sway with them, and that we have appointed their own broad paths, so that they might find their way? Different explanations. Geographically, we know that the mountains have roots which go under the layers of the earth and are actually holding it. If those mountains were not there, the earth is not at the bottom. Earth is actually in the orbit, we all know that. And there is a gravitational pull which can make the earth rotate from its orbit. A little deviation and it will be on a collision course. So the earth has to be stabilized, and this has been stabilized through a mechanism given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the sama, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word sama, it's not necessarily the sky that we see. The sama is anything beyond the earth, which can be the entire cosmos. And it's a canopy which is well guarded, which means you have an atmosphere above the earth which prevents it from being colliding with other objects and just going into extinction. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned something which usually mentioned differently. وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا فُجَاجًا سُبُلًا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. The usual understanding is that in between the mountains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made paths through which people can pass, and so that they are guided. But then Yusuf Ali looks at the next part of the verse in وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. He said we can understand it in a figurative manner as well. That people who are observant, they will look at all of these things and they will be guided to the ultimate truth that all of this has been designed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are people who will just look at these things, pass by, and never think. For example, for billions of years, people have seen apples fall from the trees. Not billions, maybe 250,000 or whatever years, human beings. But it took 1 Newton to start thinking, why does it happen? That was his observation. Science begins with observation. And we Muslims, unfortunately, are very poor at observation. When I was a medical student, we were taught to memorize a lot of things. Observation and independent thinking were not part of the educational process. We need to inculcate it into our children. In the next slide, I will have to go very quickly. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا لِبَشَرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ الْخُلْدَ أَفَإِن مِتَّ فَهُمُ الْخَالِدُونَ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ وَنَبْلُوكُم بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً وَإِلَيْنَا تُرْجَعُونَ. So next concept is that no one has been made immortal, not even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And people are investing a lot of money in the technology that once they die, they could come back to life, or the DNA repair technology. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said something which is very close to my own field of oncology, cancer medicine. Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. The usual translation, every soul shall test death. But then the question comes that human body, the physical body dies, but the soul goes back to Allah. Does soul die as well? So can we translate kullu nafsin, nafs as soul? Or nafs also means breath, or breathing, or use of oxygen. That every cell of our body, every cell anywhere that uses oxygen is a nafs. In science, there is a theory called programmed cell death, which means every cell is programmed to die. The more appropriate scientific term for that is apoptosis. Some of you doctors may know about it. Cells get damaged and they die. As we get older, our cells die and are replaced. It goes on constantly. Every day, billions of red blood cells are being destroyed and billions are being produced. But if a damaged cell does not die, it escapes the defense mechanism or the clearing mechanism of the body, it turns into cancer. And now drugs are being developed to reverse this process of a cell refusing to die and make that cell die in order to cure cancer. So if you look at these fantastic statements made 1400 years ago, we Muslims, unfortunately, did not pay much attention to them. And here we have the people that we call kafir, who are doing all the research, which Quran wanted us to do. And the purpose, وَنَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. So the purpose of life here is that we will be tested. We always think that our troubles or our test occurs when we are facing difficult situations. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ. Khair is also a trial. In fact, scholars say that enjoying a life of luxury is a worse trial, is a much bigger trial than the trial of adversity. And then what happens afterwards? You will be returned to us. So we have a brother who actually was a student at Sunday school here. He passed away, Marwan Ghapoor. May Allah bless him. He died in an accident. He was buried, I believe, yesterday. And there is a dua for him tonight as well. But Friday is a special day. And according to the hadith, there is a special time on this day when every dua is accepted. Praising Allah Ta'ala. Some scholars say that it's between the khutbah and the qiyam of the prayer, Friday prayer. Some mention from the beginning of the Friday until the Asr or until the Maghrib. But whatever it is, I think it's the sincerity of our heart. Time is important, but what's more important is that we make dua for our brothers and sisters with our hearts. Allahumma ighfir lahu warhamhu wa adkhilhu fi jannatil firdaus. Allahumma a'idhu min adhabil qabr wa min adhabil nar. Allahumma adkhilhu fi jannatil firdaus ma siddiqina wa nabiyina wa salihin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive his mistakes. Give him place in the Jannatul Firdaus. Give patience and sabr to his family to bear this loss. Give him the company of the Anbiya, the Siddiqeen, the Shuhada, the Salihin. Make his untimely death a source of entry into Jannah for his family who are patient upon this. We make this dua with sincerity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this dua. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة